Hello, and welcome to Bear Necessities. My name is Bear, and today we're going to go over the basics of macros in EQ2. So macros in EQ2 can be super complicated, and honestly, you can do a lot of very cool, complex things. I'm going to leave a link in the description to a collection of slash commands so that you can experiment. But I wanted to go over some of the pretty common uses for macros in EQ2 and talk a little bit about why they're important to your group and raid mates in certain situations. I'll also talk about some optional macros and ways people creatively use the macro system in EQ2. However, I will say that there are way more things that you can do with macros that I don't even know of, commands I've never seen before, etc. But I at least wanted to give a guide on the basics and ways I've used macros in the past. So how do we get to macros? Well, there's two ways. You can click on the EQ2 button and then you can click socials, and that will open up the social windows. It'll be on emotes by default. Then you just click on the macros tab. Another way is to just press the O key. That's the default key to open up macros. In order to create a macro, all you do is click on the click to edit, and you'll see that there's a drop down here with 4 different things: command, spellability, equip item, use item. All you have to do is click a step, and then you can write something in there, and then you hit OK. Let's put a name for it, macros. Okay, and then you click it. As you can see, I say I love macros. Alright, if you want to delete a macro, all you have to do is click on it, hit clear, and hit OK, and then it's gone. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about with macros is targeting. So whenever I click on click to edit, I can add a command in here. This is just going to be a custom command, and we're going to want to target something. So I'm just going to call it target. So say I want to target Stom here, Stom blunt blade. If I just type in /target space Stom and hit OK, now whenever I click this, it's going to target Stom blunt blade. So now you can, whenever you're targeting something or creating a targeting macro, you can also put in the full name, just no parentheses, no quotes, anything, just target Stom blunt blade, and then hit OK, and then it'll target him. One thing you want to be careful about with target macros is if there's a lot of things that are named the same, then it will get confused. So like, for example, I'm going to change this to target a Kanos resident. There's a bunch of Kanos residents over here. There's 1, 2, 3. Now if I hit target, you can see that while there's 3 right here, it actually targeted this one super far away. So it's something you have to be careful about when it comes to target macros if there's a lot of things with the same name. I don't know if it always chooses the furthest thing, but it definitely will often not choose what you need. So why are those important? On certain raids and things like that, you'll have certain ads that will spawn, and oftentimes you need to kill that ad immediately. That's like the primary DPS target. So you'll create a target macro for that specific mob, throw it on your hotbar, and then all you'll have to do is press that, and if it's up, it'll give you a target. You can go kill it. So that's it for target macros. Another useful target macro is creating one for yourself. So if you look at this macro that I made, it's just /target_self. I'll hit OK. So right now I'm on Stom. Click that, I'll target myself. You can see that I can target back and forth in between myself and Stom. Alright, so now let's talk a little bit about ability macros. To create an ability macro, you can kind of start with 2 different ways. You can go to edit the macro, and then you can click on speller ability and then click add step, and then you can drag an ability over, or you can just take the ability that you want. I can find the ability I want, and just drag it over. So let's think of an example of using an ability macro. So say, for example, I want to inform my group when I'm using Fae Fires, because Fae Fires is a buff, lasts 20 seconds, and it gives you 3 triggers of damage. So your group needs to know, hey, in this next 20 seconds, I need to at least use 3 combat abilities or whatever. They're probably going to be using more than that, but at least if I notify them, they'll make sure that they can take advantage of my buff. So I drag the buff over. Also, if I want to change the icon to something custom, I can just drag that icon over there. I'll name the macro Fae Fires, and then I'll check primary. And what does primary mean? Primary essentially just means that whenever this macro runs, it will actually go on cooldown whenever you use the macro based on whatever the primary ability is, and it'll actually show like the grayed out button, and if you have cooldown numbers over it, it'll show numbers, and whenever this comes off of cooldown, then this primary ability will actually show up just like a normal button. But if I want to inform my group, like we were talking, I can also hit a command, and then I can do /G, which is just group chat, and I can say Fae Fires 3 procs of damage, something like that, right? Then when I hit OK and then I cast it, then it will tell my group 3 procs of damage. However, I'm not in a group right now, and I do want to show you what it actually would show. So I'll actually add another step, and I'll just say Fae Fires 3 procs of damage, just so you can see it. All right, let's escape. Let's pull this down to our hotbar. I could also just use it from right there, but then when I press it, you'll see Fae Fires 3 procs of damage. It casts the spell, and it also says in my chat you are not in a group, but if I was, it would also tell my group that. So that's pretty much adding a command to an ability for something that's pretty common. You see this a lot with buffs. Of course, don't put this on every single ability. You don't want to tell your group every single ability you're casting, but things like buffs or like temporary buffs like this are always good to inform your group about. All right, another thing that I do want to mention is another important command is canceling spellcast, and this is going to be the last one that I talk about before I move on to the next thing. But say, for example, I have my group cure, and oftentimes it's very important to make sure that you get your group cure off quickly, because a lot of the AoEs and raids are damage over time abilities. So I'll just call this group cure, and then I'm going to add a step actually above this that's going to be cancel _ spellcast. Then I'm going to hit OK. Then let's drag this down. So say I'm casting a group heal, and see how long it takes. See, a group heal takes quite a long time to cast. Maybe an AoE hits like right there in the beginning of my group cast, and I really need to get that cure off quickly so it doesn't tick on the group. Well, I want to cancel what I'm currently casting, so I'll hit that, and then I'll hit this, and you'll see that it actually canceled the spell casting of my group cure, or of my group heal, and then it cast my group cure. Now you want to be careful when you do that, because cancel, if you're a spammer and you spam buttons, then you'll cancel your group cast, and I'll show you an example of that. So I'm casting group heal. See, if I spam this, then it's going to continually cancel my spell cast. So if you're a spammer, maybe it's not for you. You can just press escape to cancel your spell cast, and then you can hit 4, or you can hit your group cure. But if you're not a spammer, then that's a pretty useful macro. Now there's a lot of other stuff that you can do with these. I'll give one more example real quick, because it's actually pretty just built in to their macro ability. So say, for example, you have an ability that works on a specific target. So usually they're kind of orange if it's a beneficial spell. So let's give an example, cure. Whenever I pull cure over, you'll notice that cure also has this little target box. So maybe I want to create a macro that cures myself. We'll call it self cure, and then in the target I'll type in bear, and then I'll hit OK. Then when I pull this to my hotbar, you'll see that whenever I cast cure, I'm casting it on myself. It'll be easier if I do this with like a, let's do it with like a heal, because you'll be able to see it hit me over time. So like bear, then I'll hit escape here. Okay, I know it looks wrong, but you'll see I put regrowth on myself. The cure one is actually something I use all the time. I usually use click to cure when it comes to curing people in the raid or people in my group. But when it comes to curing myself, I usually just put it on a separate button, and then I can, keybind it to whatever, and then it will cure myself. All right, I think that's it for targeted abilities or ability commands, or all I wanted to go over with ability commands. So next I'm going to get into a little bit more complex stuff, and then we'll kind of finish up the video from there. Alright, so the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to macros are priority macros. So the way that the macro system works in EQ2 is that if you have multiple abilities on a macro, so we'll just pull 3 heals over here. I'll just call this heal priority. Now whenever I hit, we'll hit OK there, then we're going to reopen this just so you can see what happens. So then whenever I test this macro, you'll see that it uses the first ability and then it uses the last ability in the macro. So there's a way that we can kind of overload this system. That's just the way it works, but we can kind of overload this system to make it so that we're always casting things in a priority. I'll give you an example. We hit OK there to save it. Now whenever we hit test, it's going to use the first ability and then it's going to try to use fishing, and you'll see I got a no eligible target for fishing because there's not a fishing hole nearby, right? Or I'm not targeting a fishing hole. So if I hit OK and then I drag this to my hotbar, and then we'll actually leave this open again, and then I just started spamming it, you'll see that it used my first ability, used my second ability, then used my third ability. And because I was spamming it, it was always trying to use whatever was on top that was up. So first ability is on cooldown, okay, we'll use the second ability. Oh, second ability is on cooldown, okay, we'll use the third ability. So that's how a priority macro works in EverQuest. Essentially you can utilize these to make sure you're casting the highest priority thing first, then the second, and then the third, and fourth, fifth, whatever. So what are some good useful things that you can use this for? One thing that I use it for a lot is reses. So for example, I have Fierce Rousing, and then I have Primeval Awakening. So these are my 2 single target in combat reses. Fierce or Primeval Awakening has no res effects, and Fierce Rousing does. So Primeval Awakening is my good res, or my better res, while Fierce Arousing is my not as good of a res, right? So one thing that I can do with this, and then of course I can add the overloader at the bottom with fishing or trapping or whatever you want it to be. I can drag my res just so I can do this, and I'll just say this is priority prio res. Now if I drag this in my hotbar, anytime I want to res somebody, if I click on someone, they're dead, and I click on that res, it's going to use my best res first, and if my best res is down, then it'll use my second best res. So that's one thing that I can think of off the top of my mind. One thing that I'll say I wouldn't recommend priority macros for, all the time at least, is like don't just throw like all your DPS abilities in here. From a perspective of making sure that you're using all your abilities, yeah, it's fine. You could throw all your DPS abilities in one thing. You can spam it, but I would recommend just setting good keybinds, trying to understand all your abilities, understand your class, before you move to something like priority macros, because you're just not going to learn as well. Also, there's going to be certain things that you may want to use, like for example, say you're playing a wizard. Every time you use Ice Comet, maybe you want to use some sort of consumable before it, or maybe you want to use some other ability to buff your next Ice Comet, things like that. And if you're in a priority macro that's just spamming all your DPS abilities, you're gonna overall do less DPS. You're gonna have less of an understanding of what you're doing if you're a newer player. But if you just want to go, you know, kind of veg out, do some dungeons, or maybe you're doing some soloing or whatever, and you just want to spam one button, you know, all power to you for sure. You know, there's tons of ways you can use macros in EQ2. This is definitely just the tip of the iceberg. But I do wonder, like, how do you use macros if you are an experienced player? What creative things do you use them for? Please let me know in the comments. And if you like this video and you'd like to see more like it, just please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell to be notified when new content is available. So thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time.